This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 146.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I'm here with Mr. Matt, the Meme Master Rogers. Matt, how you doing, my friend?
I am great. Very, very good. I have so many things going on right now mentally.
This was a good tune-up podcast for both of us, I think, especially you, just because you can step in front of kids tomorrow.
I know, seriously. We talked to our friend Kyle Niemis, now from Quizizz, and it just kind of represents products that we believe in. I think that's what I'm really proud of more than anything. We have talked to great educators. We've always spoken what I feel like is truth, and we've held ourselves accountable. I think sometimes you do that more diligently than I do, which really says, hey, we're taking a guest and we're going to challenge their thought with, ideally tough to answer questions and try to get thoughtful answers that actually will have an impact. And so it obviously helps. We know Kyle from before, but I felt like we talked about the transition briefly, about him leaving education, but not completely leaving education, just representing educators in a different way through a product that we both believe in. And that is 2 for 2. We have only included opportunities to talk to products we believe in. So hopefully if you would like us to vet things for us, that's what we're doing when we consider who we deem we need to talk to.
Yeah, and like you said, it sticks to the core values of this podcast. And we believe in Kyle. We believe in his values as an educator. He was on show 25 with us, so a long, long time ago, which is crazy to think, over 100 shows ago. And we believe in Quizizz. It's a product that we both have used in the classroom. We both have used to facilitate professional development together and separately. And it is one that aligns to enhancing the instructional practice of a teacher and the learning experience of a student. And if it can do one of those, I deem it valuable. This one does both. And our conversation was very rich tonight. Kyle shares a lot about the features of the product, but I don't feel like we had a feature webinar tutorial-like conversation. We had a very educationally based conversation. We dive a little bit into AI. You and I go back and forth a little bit there in a valuable way. And so I'm really proud of this conversation that we put on it. And to be honest, I have people reach out to me about coming on our show. And I never, 120 shows ago when we had Kyle on, I literally was willing to talk to anyone. We had unbelievable guests right out of the gate, and that has never changed. But we've gotten to the point where I actually do have people reaching out and that I'm saying no because it doesn't align to the values of this podcast. And that's going to be the same for when we decide to highlight a product specifically. We wanted to highlight and talk about Quizizz tonight. And I see us doing that with maybe 3 or 5 more, right? Maybe close to 10, but I wouldn't even be able to name those 10. But it has to be something that aligns to the values of this podcast and aligns to the values of good teaching. So I would highly encourage you to really tune in for this one. I think there's a lot of insightful information that you can gain, and then some resources at the end for you to check out, for you to dive deeper on your own. So without any further delay, let's check in with Teach Better and jump right into that conversation with Kyle Niemis.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Hey, Kyle, welcome back to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
I am wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us. So I want to kick things off just for you to reintroduce yourself to our audience, because unless they have been listening to us since July of 2021, show 25, there's a chance that they missed your first appearance on the Powered Up Podcast. So really excited to have you back. We're going to have a brand new conversation tonight. But like I said, kick things off for our audience, officially introduce yourself, and just kind of give us a snapshot of your career in education and that recent transition you've made as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's crazy. It was 2 years ago. So my name's Kyle Niemis, and I was a middle school science teacher for a very long time, 13 years. And then I became a tech coach for a few years, and then back to a science teacher. And then now for the last year, I've been building a community with Quizizz and doing all sorts of really cool things.
What would you say was your top 3 attributes as a classroom teacher?
Oh, man. Top 3 attributes I would say was willingness to try new things, not scared of taking risks and failing. I cared very much. I always said kids before standards, which got some pushback, but I was always very much on kids first, and then you teach the heart, the rest will follow, sort of thing. And I like to think I was decently good at Dave Burgess in his Teach Like a Pirate. He was very good on teach lessons so good that and so fun that people would pay money to show up. And there's no way, of course, that applied to every lesson, but that was always in my head, is always trying to make things as good as I could, that maybe they would even pay money because it was so fun to be in that class. And again, let's be clear, that was not all the lessons, but that was always a goal of mine. And I think I hit it sometimes.
That's fantastic. I guess, you have a trajectory that we often wish happened more often. And we could talk a little bit about your classroom as well, but you are in a realm right now where you are supporting a very prominent educational tool through technology. How do you feel like you bring your teacher knowledge to a outside company that teachers across the country and across the world depend on for quality instruction, quality formative assessment in their daily instruction?
I love that question. And that's my favorite part of this job, is being able to bring in everything I've learned about teaching and kids and offer whatever I can to the Quizizz team. I would say I bring in, like, very much like we talked about on the episode 2 years ago with UDL. I think I bring in that expertise when it comes to really trying to reach the needs of all learners, which is like such a ridiculously hard goal for any teacher to do. So that's very much a lens whenever we're developing new things and new products. Like, the amount of times I think I've also told the Quizizz team, whenever we're developing a new game mode or anything like that, like, think of that kid. Like, every game mode has to be thought of with that kid in mind, who's so used to coming in last place in every single game they play in the classroom. Like, how do we make sure that when we design anything, that kid feels good at the end of the experience, which is a really hard challenge. So I think I very much bring that mentality to everything that we're trying to create at Quizizz.
So give us a snapshot of what Quizizz is. So it's been around for a long time, but we possibly have listeners who have seen it before. They've only played maybe in a professional development session on the student user end side. They've never developed it for themselves. But what's that elevator pitch for what Quizizz is and why it's important to classrooms?
Yeah, I think I always have to start off with any ed tech tool of, like, what does it do? What problem does it solve, right? And so I will tell you that for a long time, of course, there were worksheets in the world and teachers were just doing that, right? And then in came a couple other pretty popular tools that were very gamified. And students now were, like, instead of playing worksheets, they were, like, competing and trying to get answers really, really fast and, like, shooting to get first place. And that was really cool. And then quizzes came in, And what they did is they said basically like, yeah, there's these tools out there, but like your kids are just really, really focused on winning and getting the answer right, or I'm sorry, and just getting the answer quickly, and they're not really caring about getting the answer right. So wouldn't it be really cool if there was like a practice platform where like kids are still having all that fun, but the emphasis was more on like really making sure students understand the content versus simply like who answered the fastest. And so that's kind of, I think, what took us from 0 to 60 over the course of the last 4 years was like we really filled that niche of like fun engagement, but still rigorous, where kids were like, being forced to actually learn the material and practice the material. So that's kind of like the where we entered into that space.
I want to just add, like, I remember coming across Quizizz, and you may not say the tool that you would walk down a hallway and you would hear the same theme music from a banned word in a lot of classrooms at this point. Just because, especially in like a middle school or high school environment, a science teacher doesn't know that a math teacher also used Kahoot or something like that. Or, they may have 6 periods and did 5 Kahoots throughout that day type scenario. And it became, as you mentioned, just button mashing, kind of like old school Nintendo when we were doing like the track games, right? That's what the kids were doing. And the retention was not there. And I remember something as simple and obvious as questions being on the device as opposed to the board being something that I saw immediately, or a little bit of that own pacing and the meme generation early on, right? Such a simple thing. We had a professional development, a friend of ours made a meme set for it, whether it was successful or not, and that was an ongoing thing that I just felt like it hit the academic side of things so much more effectively that you could actually somewhat depend on the data afterwards. And that was a big change. How do you feel like you've been seeing teachers more consistently use it effectively and using the data and information to drive future instruction? Because I think that's the big key of it, and all of those style tools.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head of like the driving the instruction, right? I think like with any tool you're using, like there's definitely a place where like you want anything you want to do, like you want to see kids smile, you want them laughing, like you want them having a good time. Like there's definitely so much value in that. But like you said, like I think the second gigantic component of any kind of formative assessment tool is that when you can easily see like at a glance like what your class knows and what students know and don't know, and then of course you can use that to meet with students or drive your instruction. So I think that's to me also like the 1-2 punch of Quizizz. It's incredibly fun, engaging, and then you can use all the amazing data that you get afterwards to drive your instruction. Because I think you're right. I think if the data is not reliable, then it can't fulfill that main purpose that you need formative assessments to be able to do.
So over the the last couple of years, I would say as we shifted out of the pandemic, there's a lot of teachers that stopped using technology a lot because they felt like all they could do was use technology during that time period. So let's say we have teachers listening that during that time were using Quizizz and they've kind of taken a break. They've taken a break from that and many other technology tools. What has changed over the last 2 or 3 years with the platform that has taken it beyond just like Matt said, the questions are now on the student screen. They can go through the questions at their own pace, as opposed to being teacher-led question by question with some other tools. So what are some of those major things that you? And I know that's a loaded question because there's a lot, but what are even if it's just 1 or 2 big things that literally a teacher who used Quizizz a lot in the past may not even be aware that it has shifted over the last 2 years?
All right, I'm going to give you 3 because you're absolutely right. That is a loaded question. I feel like you could ask me what changed in the last 2 months, and I think it'd be hard for me to summarize the top things. And I would say like that's what I love about being on this team is that it's evolving and changing. So I would say the top thing that easily comes to mind is that it started off as like multiple choice, like a lot of other tools where everything was multiple choice. And what's really cool now is I think we're at like 14 different question types. And I always like want to clarify that like I don't think more is better, but like every question type that's ever come out has been like really researched, like teachers need this. And like the last 2 that just came out, actually like yeah, the last 3 that came out were like very visual heavy. Um And so I don't need to go through all the question types, but I guess I was to just say, like, if you still think it's just a bunch of multiple choice questions, like there's some really cool like labeling questions and like hotspot where the kids like can just click on like the diagram and show you where the right angles are and all different things. Like there's just so many really cool question types that makes students think a little bit deeper than simple multiple choice. So that's one, to me, huge leap has taken over the last couple of years.
Can I ask you a quick
Uh,
question about that?
yeah.
Are all of the question types still automatically graded? Can you set them to be automatically graded, or is there some post grading that you can do with them?
So the answer is both. So I would say the most used question types are auto graded, and I don't know the exact number, but let's just say 75% of them are auto graded. So which is, I think, is obviously like incredibly important that something does grading for
Right.
you.
That's one of the
But then
best
there's like
features.
totally, but then there's certain questions that are like open ended. That's really hard for that to be auto graded, or even like an audio response where kids can just say their answer, or a video response where they can record themselves. So stuff like that, at least right now, who knows with AI coming out, all that, it maybe will be auto graded, but right now those are not. But for the most part, they're auto graded, which again is a huge time saver. No, it's good. And then the second, since I've been there, they've really doubled down on on mastery, like really, really like focused on that, like helping students grow. So there's like a mastery mode and there's a mastery peak and redemption questions where kids get it wrong, they can try again. Like there's just like more and more, it's like, how do we make sure that students have the opportunity to grow and improve versus just place first or second? And like there's so much emphasis now on improvement, both from the students so they can see their growth and teachers can see their growth. So like, again, that hits a big part of me that I love, that it's, you could have gone from a 50 to a 75, and that's pretty amazing, right? And it doesn't matter where you landed. So I like that there's a strong emphasis on student growth, now more than ever. And the third thing I will say, and this is still like kind of lesser known, is that there is a lessons feature, which I think is still kind of like this hidden gem of Quizizz. And so I don't even know if you guys know about this, but like, and again, I'm not going to say any other tools, but like what's really great about Quizizz lessons is that you can take your Google Slides and just pop them into Quizizz and then deliver your lesson. And then you can still put all those fun Quizizz questions wherever you want them to be in a lesson. So you can use Quizizz for like instruction, whether that be like, direct instruction, or you can have it async when they do it at home. But like whenever we do any webinar, I always do it on a Quizizz lesson. Like it's just like, it's a really, really fun way to like deliver content and then still have all the fun of quizzes. And you can even put leaderboards and whatever you want to do, but like it's a total hybrid. And then so many people don't even realize that we have like this lessons feature. I think because you said 3 years ago, it was like this alternative, just kind of quizzing platform. So yeah, it's a really cool kind of thing that is still, to me, this hidden gem.
Well, and I think, Ken, from our point of view, you're utilizing Quizizz for what it does best in that realm. Like that sounds super engaging to me. And you're using Quizizz for its absolute best features and the, providing of information that you might get on slides or, PowerPoint traditional feature. Like it doesn't matter what way you deliver that, but sometimes you water down the a formative assessment and the feedback that you get because it's contained within a lesser platform. That's actually, yes, I did not know about that, and that is very interesting to me. By all means.
Yeah, that was one of those questions where I was asking for a friend, but I was definitely in that camp a little bit just because of moving out of the moving out of the classroom and into an instructional coach role. My usage of the platform is less because it's one of many things I support with teachers. So I was selfishly asking for my own information a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, I remember when I first came on board, I was like, what? You all have lessons? Like, I didn't know this as a teacher. They're like, we've had lessons for like a year now. I was like, why don't we tell more people about this? This is so fun.
Well, I guess like from an evaluation point of view, and again, obviously you have a favorite tool. Like it does feel like there is a watering down or there is a merging of a lot of skills. Everyone kind of does very similar things, even though there are specialties. What do you feel like continues to be something that stands out about Quizizz that makes it still it is a tool that I love. It is a tool that I use in my class. I have my rhythm of how I use it. Now I have to reevaluate that. But what makes it stand out as still being just such a bedrock style tool in a lot of teachers' tool belts?
Yeah, I mean, and that's such a good question because I think you're right. I think that like, and we're a little guilty of it too. I think, to be honest, as far as like, I think everyone wants to be the tool that does everything, right? It's like, oh, we do it all, right? And like, I think that like the more and more that happens, like you absolutely you nailed it. Like, how can you possibly do everything really, really well? And I will say that applies to any ed tech tool. And I think you're right. I think that the reason people keep coming back to us is that formative assessment piece. Like, it's just like there's never a situation that your kids don't need to practice, learn material, that you don't need to understand their level of understanding. And so I think like that's whether you use the lessons or any other kind of fun things we have going on. I think that the main thing we do is really help you figure out what your kids know, and we make studying like more fun, I think, than it probably could be.
So I want to put a little of an instructional focus on this. So I'm going to ask you two different scenarios, very basic scenarios in a classroom, and how quizzes can enhance that experience. So the first one is you're doing some layer of small group instruction. Could be station rotation, could be you've just delivered a 20-minute mini lesson lecture. Kids are often doing independent work, and you plan on pulling a group of 5 or 6 students that you observe struggled or what have you. But there's some layer of independent learning going on in your classroom, and some layer of the teacher working with sets of students. So how can I leverage quizzes to enhance that experience for both me instructionally and the students' learning experience?
Can I just basically tell you how I use quizzes as a teacher? Because I feel like this kind of fits under that exact scenario. I never, not never, I almost never use the live version, the one that was like I guess the most commonly used version. I always, with my style, because I was more of a flipped classroom kind of teacher, guide on the side kind of thing. It sounds like that's kind of what you're saying, where students are able to utilize kind of some of the stuff on your own, maybe while you're having small group instruction or you're walking around helping other students. So like that was very much my scenario as well. So I always use what's called homework mode or asynchronous mode in quizzes, where it was assigned to students and they could practice however many times they needed to on their own. And so I think the way I would normally set it up is like, here's your quizzes. You can do it on your own pace, log in whenever you're ready. I was like, I'd always say to them, like, make sure you get at least an 80 or 85, or depending on, of course, on the students. And then before you move on to A, B, and C, or before you do whatever. So it was a very intricate part of like my kind of choice learning activity board sort of thing, where they had to have this like before they can go on to other choices. So I think the fact that it offers an asynchronous option for students to access it at their own time was incredibly clutch for me.
And the value of that is I started with that question because I knew it was matching your instructional style. So the next one's going to be harder for you.
Thank you for the layup. I appreciate that.
Because I was my instructional style was very similar, and the value of that you can't underestimate is it's providing the students feedback while they're working independently, as opposed to, like you referenced earlier, just the worksheet. They could be doing the whole worksheet wrong and not know it, or they could be doing the whole worksheet right and not know it and not be confident and feel like they're doing it wrong. Having an automatically grading tool that's giving the students feedback is so much more valuable, because it allows them to be more data-driven students. And correct me if I'm wrong, but as the teacher, you can have kind of that scoreboard on your laptop, perched to your left, and you can keep your eye on it when you're working with students. So you can observe and say like, wow, every single kid that's doing this quiz is bombing it. maybe I need to stop and clarify something, or shut it down, or tell, it allows you to observe that, or you can observe one student that is doing it multiple times and continues to struggle with it. And so you can go interact with that student. So it allows you to observe that data live during the lesson as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, not to get heavy on like settings and features, because I know that's not the goal, but what I do love about quizzes, and when I was a tech coach, this was like always my top thing I said about quizzes, is you have like this flexibility to like turn on and off certain things. So like in this exact example, like you have the option for students, when they get an answer wrong, it'll tell them what the right answer is, or it'll just tell them they got it wrong and they can find out at the end of the quiz, or they don't find out until you work with them. So like even just having those three options, like, and that's one of the things I love about quizzes is that flexibility to be like, do you want your kids to know what the right answer is right away, or do you not? And there's that can apply to all different kind of places. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I would definitely have that data on and use that to stop the class from time to time for sure.
Yeah, and like you're highlighting with those settings, it's what's great about it too. So you have one Quizizz. It's just for teachers that haven't used it too much. Just picture an online thing that has different question types, right? That are automatically graded. You could run it live in your classroom, or you could run it student paced, like Kyle said. And now you have the option of choosing: do students see the answers, not see the answers? So all of those options with the same exact quizzes that you had. So the other instructional style or scenario is I would like to use quizzes to facilitate a live lesson in my classroom. And so knowing that there's this third option you told us about with the lesson, obviously please involve that. But I, I would like to say that you're using it for more than just the review game, right? And I love the review game. The classic review days are great in classrooms. But the thing that kind of irks me at times when I see is teachers just play the game. That there's no conversation facilitated. There's no pausing at questions and conversation and looking at questions that have variety of answers. So how can we use quizzes to enhance the live delivery of a lesson?
So let me make sure I get this right. So we're just like stereotypical direct instruction in front of the
Yep,
class.
whole class direct instruction.
Where would quizzes kind of fit into that equation, sort of thing, right?
Yep.
All right. So obviously the easy slip in is that using the quizzes lesson. So when you are delivering your lesson, you can import some questions that are, poll questions along the way, check for understanding, all that kind of stuff. So I think that to me is like the gimme one. But then I also think that there's still a play just for the homework mode too. Like, okay, like after you deliver it, like then the students either practice at home or on their own. Like it could still easily be a check for understanding after you deliver your lesson itself too. So to me, those are the two ways, I guess, that I'd see. I think realistically, the most common way, especially if you're a new person listening, is, hey, we taught the lesson. Let's play a game together and check for understanding. And there's nothing wrong with that either. There's nothing wrong with okay, we all just learned it. Let's make sure we're good to go, but let's have some fun along the way. And we're gonna do mastery peak and have some power ups, and it's gonna be super cool. Like, so I think that also easily fits into this equation. Is probably the most common use case that we see.
So the end of this that really is beneficial to us, besides the kids getting feedback in a kind way. I know I mentioned the meme set, but there's something about getting an answer wrong and then feeling crummy about yourself, and then a silly picture or something that pops up that says, hey, like it's not a big deal, you'll get them next time. Really, I know you laugh about it, but like it makes a difference.
I'm on team meme. I'm with
right?
you. I'm
like,
one of the few people on team meme still.
It's crazy to me how simple seeing a silly meme is. Like, oh, it took this. Oh, I got that one wrong. I shouldn't have gotten this wrong. I feel negative about myself. And boom, I see something silly. I automatically break and I'm mentally ready for the next one. That I think makes a huge difference. So from the kids' end, yeah, you get great feedback. Can you really dive into what you think is fantastic from the adult side, whether that's managing kids with it, or if we want to jump into the actual data and information you're getting out of quizzes? Because one of the things that I think is they have 4 main things that they hit you with right afterwards that I think are interesting, not necessarily academic, like how long kids tend to spend on a question or the most incorrect question of the group, like quick hitting points that teachers really need to know.
Can I actually just go back to memes for a second, just because you opened that door?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay. And I say this because memes, like, again, if you've used it, like the amount of people who come up to us at a conference, but quizzes with the memes, right? And I think like our co-founders now, because quizzes has evolved into such a huge thing, like there's definitely a part of them I think that would want to like get rid of the memes, because like I can't believe like this is still how we're known as like the one with the memes. But I feel the same way you do, Matt. And like, if there's anything at all that you can put into your classroom that's going to like make kids feel better or make them smile, like I'm all about that. So I don't know if you saw that, like this past winter, we partnered with Canva, And so like if you're a Canva fan, and if you're not a Canva fan, like you should be a Canva fan, but like if you go to Canva and you search for quizzes, there are 30 memes that the Canva team, their design team made just to be Quizizz memes that are all like meant to be so you can plug in your teacher's name, like your name. So it says like, like Mr. Rogers thinks you're crushing it. It's like a really corny, like can being crushed and things like that. So like these really terrible like dad jokes that you can put like your name in there or your face in there. So they're meant to be like these cool memes because in quizzes you can put your own meme set on there and you don't have to use like the pre-made one. So it was really cool. And like I did this session at ISTE and like there was like hundreds of people at this booth just to hear about quizzes and Canva memes. So like there is value in memes and silly things to make kids smile. So I think that's really important to know.
Well, and
Yeah.
again, it softens the blow of a student that knows that they may not end up at the top of the leaderboard, because that is a big deal. And when that is their only sole focus in some of the other tools, like just that break and pause and recognition that you got a personalized meme just changes, like it almost changes it softens everything about the whole experience, which I think is an underrated feature that, whether it is known as the meme thing or not, like there is a real, especially as we talk about like the how kids handle things and the sensitivity, it makes a difference.
Yes, I think so too. But I can go on and on about memes. But I'm glad that we're on the same meme page of silly little things that make kids feel good. It's never going to be a bad thing. But you were asking me about data. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
well,
I
and I
completely
think that like you conclude whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, and I do like the aspect of, as you're mentioning, I found myself only doing live quizzes when I first was rolling it out. A little bit of the control freak, everyone's at the same spot, but it was also a one-to-one comparison in a lot of ways of something that I would have formerly done or whatever the case may be, but I prefer this. And then transition to asynchronous or homework. I actually did assign, like I remember I'd have to post like the code to join, and here are the numbers, and the kids would have to do it between this frame. I tried that when we were taking devices home, but the feedback, I really appreciate how it's often teacher friendly, because so often we'll finish something in a lot of other places and it'll kick you out to like what feels like a Google form, and you can spend an hour sifting through, and then you get to the chance to talk to the kid. Oh, why do you think you asked that or answered that? Oh, I read that question wrong and I just clicked too quickly, or something like that, that we could dive so heavily, that I find the data that you get to be so functional in that snapshot view, as well as if you were to dive deeper into it.
Yeah. And I will, again, this is also something I think I was talked about when I was a tech coach about something I loved about quizzes, because I think I felt the same way you do. Is like most times you're going to give me a bunch of data and like bar graphs and like the amount of times we've seen that as teachers at a faculty meeting and you're just like, I have to interpret this and figure out, like, it's just like, there's definitely not always a positive feeling when it comes to like data and reports and things like that. So I think I very much, as that kind of person, appreciated that Quizzes was like, it's almost so simple. You can't not use it and learn from it, because like you said, it just says like, here's the top question that kids didn't know, like here's like how fast they were doing on them, like it's color coded for you, like this is the thing that you need to reteach, like it's almost like so insanely easy to interpret and use that like you almost can't not use it. So I agree with that for sure.
The one other thing I want to just add is, while it's active, I don't even want to say live because, it may be asynchronous, but in that live version, seeing how many yes and how many no that are coming. And sometimes you're doing it that every kid is seeing the same order of questions. Sometimes I'm sure you can shuffle it. But it is interesting to see that almost progress bar switch of the percentage of yes, or the amount of yes compared to the no's, can shift and kind of display even while the kids are taking the quizzes actively. And I found that to be, I don't think of a whole lot of times that I used it or benefited from it, but is there something deeper behind why that is the best piece of information to show while it's live, or some of the other features that you guys at Quizizz say, we are doing this with a purpose, that maybe us educators should be more, acknowledging of?
No, and to be honest, I don't know if I have the exact answer behind all that. I can tell you that it's always the same mission of like helping teachers get whatever is the most important to them in that moment. So that's the best I got as far as the behind the scenes is the
That's
that was
a-okay
probably
by
before I
us.
was there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the features and the ways that you can utilize Quizizz that will help teachers with their classroom efficiencies? I think one of the biggest problems in education for teachers specifically is the lack of efficiency that exists in their workflow, whether it be the demands of the district that the teachers can't control, but also teachers maybe not being aware of things that could be way more efficient in the way they create materials and curate work, and just the tools that are available to help with that, or the features of tools that they're already currently using that they could be more efficient with. So again, what are some of those things that you can utilize in Quizizz to work more efficiently, or just utilize Quizizz to be more efficient as a teacher?
Oh man, you're really tempting me here with this AI conversation. Can we go there?
Go for it, but you have to give me something before that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm still going to answer your question. I
Yeah.
think when
No,
it
yeah.
comes to
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to efficiency, yes, like, okay, I'll answer the question first. Like when it comes to like being efficient, like when I go to a conference, I'll always call people up to me and I'll be like as I'm talking to people, I'll be like, all right, what are you teaching next week? Like, I promise you, there's millions and millions and millions of quizzes and stuff on here. It's already there. We can even like pick from different quizzes. So like my favorite thing to do is like, what do you teach next week? Poof, we made a whole quiz from other people's amazing stuff within like 2 minutes. So I think as far as creating the stuff before AI, that was always a very efficient way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And
But now,
if I could
oh,
add to that real quick, not only can you just take a quiz that's done and use it or modify it a little bit, but you also have the question importing, correct? Can you just highlight that real quick? Because that's relatively new that some people might not be aware of that. And then you can do AI, I promise.
so you mean just simply like the idea of importing, teleporting questions?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, teleporting is it's this magical thing where like if you are someone who loves to shop, it's almost has that vibe of like you can just like go ahead and like if you search for like dividing fractions, it'll pull up 10 really great dividing fractions at seventh grade, and you can just be like, I'm gonna grab that one and that one and that one, and like you can like add, almost like add to cart, and then like you can just like import all these different questions from wherever you need them to be. We call it teleporting. So yes, like, that's like it's like you don't have to find that perfect quiz, and usually it is there. But if you can't, you can easily import questions from other people's quizzes, no problem. Is that what you were thinking for import
Yes.
questions?
Yep.
All right, you are free to jump into AI. Go for it.
Okay, I know everyone's talking AI right now, but like you're talking about efficiency and like that. I mean, part of it is just because AI is cool and it's buzzy, and like at the time, I don't know when you're releasing this podcast, but maybe it'll be old news by then. But at least right now, it's pretty darn important and part of education. So, and this is also timely because I sent out a tweet last week, and it was the biggest tweet I've ever sent out in the history of my entire Twitter, and it was all about this like one thing, which is just to me speaks to like the AI, and it was just that in Quizizz you can grab a YouTube video and then you can go to the new Quizizz AI and just like paste in the link, and it'll make an entire like quiz out of whatever YouTube video that you pick out there to show your students. It's like so insanely magical, and I think it was so appealing. So when it comes to efficiency, like whether it be a YouTube video or the Quizizz AI, you can do all sorts of things where you can just pull in your PDF or your Google Slides or like anything you already have and make an entire quiz based on what you want. Like that's pretty darn efficient right there. So
Okay.
I'll pump my brakes a little bit. Yeah.
Can you repeat that thing about the YouTube? I want to make sure I'm understanding that right, because I'm sorry. I'll admit I was a little distracted. I went on your Twitter just to see, and you do have 560,000 views on this video. So can you explain that again?
I love how you're checking to make sure I just wasn't completely
I
lying.
can't say that I'm not on the same tweet right now.
Yes, it had 500,000, which is crazy. Like, and it's just like, so, okay. So what it is this insanely simple idea that as teachers, a lot of us use YouTube videos to teach or for students to watch. And like, you can just take the link, which takes half a second, go to Quizizz AI and paste the link. It'll take less than a minute. It'll read, it'll go through the transcript of the YouTube video and it'll make an entire quiz for you based on that YouTube video, like in from start to finish in like less than a minute. Honestly, it's so cool.
So I'll ask this follow up, and you can answer it from both the AI if you choose to, or you can also answer it. Sorry, my dog is in the background, so if you hear woofing or jingles, I apologize. He was being a bad boy downstairs. Sorry. So feel free to answer it from the AI perspective or the resources. I noticed that you have certain things like the district resources, which I think is a really nice feature. I can go on and see other quizzes specifically made from teachers within my district that I think answers the biggest qualm teachers have when it comes to sharing materials, which is, can I trust the source? So in that realm, I jump onto Quizizz because, like every tool, it's like iMovie when kids were creating things and it just got out of hand and kind of took away from the value of it. That you would have kids going into quizzes and creating their own quizzes, and they'd have 4 really good questions, and then you get to the 5th question, and of course you didn't preview the 5th question, and it says a bad word or has a bad joke or whatever the case may be. How do you find yourself combating that? Are these quizzes or are these resources vetted enough to be trusted with, we'll say, minimal previewing?
Man, I love that question. And the reason I love that question is because that is like a really good question that we do get. And it's an important thing to talk about. And so I think the first thing is like, I've never ever searched for a quiz and had anything that was inappropriate or anything like that just because of all the filters and stuff like Quizizz has. So like that's the first thing is like that doesn't happen. But as far as like, is it a quality quiz, right? It was made by a teacher. So I think it's a great question. And so my answer to this is the quizzes are filtered, and when you look at them, by the ones that are the most viewed, the most liked, so almost like teacher approved, if you will. So you'll see those first that are hopefully tried and true. That out of the millions, these are the ones that have been already seen and enjoyed the most. Um, and I will also say that we're kind of working in that direction. Like we're working to have some partners. I was actually talking to someone at Quizizz today, and we're looking like to partner with NASA and some other like really reputable companies to start having some things that are like approved by NASA, or I'm sure it's gonna have a much better wording than that. But you know what I'm saying? So I say that to say that that is very much something that like I think you're absolutely right, and it's a big question we get. So I think we are going in that direction to make sure that we do have some of that stuff. That to say, it's never actually been an issue for me or anyone I've ever heard of. It's only been a common question we hear a lot.
Well, and I
Does that
think
make
just
sense?
comes down to trust, right? How do I trust this with, I think I'm saving myself all this time because I'm not making it, or I'm importing a question, and it's the trust. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to this AI. The main issue is I want to trust it, but I don't understand it enough to really trust it. Yes, they might be able to pull out the right answer in that quiz, but what is that? What are those 3 wrong answers? Are they outrageously wrong? Are they very close that my kids might not tell the difference? Or are they just completely out of left field?
Yeah, to me, that's absolutely my biggest qualm with AI too, is that no one knows seventh grade kids in my classroom like I know seventh grade kids in my classroom. I don't care how good of AI you are. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the quick, easy answer is like anything it makes, you can modify and tweak, and you have complete control. Like, but of course, like, you want it to be as good as possible because then it's not efficient anymore. If they make 8 questions, you have to go through them all and change them all, then you might as well just make them yourself. So I think this like all AI that's the $1 million question with all AI. I think is how reliable is it? And so far I think it's good, and I think it's going to keep getting better. But because before AI quizzes was already so easy to make and modify and stuff like that, so like the efficiency, I don't think has ever been a big question, but I think it's a two really good questions you just asked.
So I'm gonna ask you a deep question on this since you went down the AI rabbit hole. So I'm gonna follow you
All
down
right.
here. Why,
No, let's do it.
as a great classroom teacher, does the use of AI in this instance plug in the YouTube video, makes my quizzes for me? It makes every question. I don't touch them. They're perfect. I use it to help facilitate learning in my classroom. Why, as a great classroom teacher, does the use of this tool not degrade my value in any way?
Oof, like how is AI not just like replacing me? Man, you want me to answer that $1 million question? I can tell you my opinion.
I want your opinion. That's why you're on here, because we value your opinion.
My opinion is that nothing's ever going to replace like the emotions and the things that are the most important to teaching. Um, and it is going to free up your time. This is always my thought, right? Like as a teacher, if there was anything, AI or whatever it was, that was going to free up my time, like I always actually got a lot of slack because I didn't do long open-ended questions for my science tests. So like because I didn't want to spend 5 hours every test grading, even though it maybe made my test not as good. And my counter was like, but now I can spend those 5 hours developing worthwhile, engaging, or even just checking in on my kids and do the things that I actually feed my soul as a teacher. So I think if you have something that is like a quote unquote shortcut, like it doesn't degrade the main reason, it hopefully just frees up your time to do the things that feed your soul and actually have the most important impact on kids, which I mean, that's my opinion of it. What is yours, Ken?
I would say very similar. I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of less sci-fi scary things that you could put in the same camp as AI. Automatic grading, formative tools would be in that camp, right? 10 years ago, if I did a formative check in my classroom, I had to manually grade every one of my students to see where they're at. I can now use a tool like Quizizz that will automatically grade the same exact style question so that instead of spending my time grading, I can spend my time looking at the data and making instructional decisions in that moment or for the next class to differentiate learning in my classroom. It enhances my ability as a great teacher. I used a lot of flipped instruction as well as you referenced earlier, and I did a lot of presenting on it and working with teachers on it over the years. And I'll never forget, I had a teacher say to me, no offense, like this looks cool, but I really value the relationships with my students. So I don't want to use a tool like this because I feel as though it would go against that value. And I said, well, I mean no disrespect by this, but I completely agree with you. And I can tell you right now, if you start to use it, you'll have better relationships with your kids because instead of the typical talk to 30 students at once, it enhances your opportunity to talk to them in 1-on-3, 1-on-5, 1-on-1. And so again, it's the use of this tool. Now I created the flipped lesson, but it's still the same idea. Like these technology tools will continue to become part of the classroom. It doesn't degrade our ability as great teachers as long as we use it in a positive way to get more value out of the time we have with our students. This AI tool can create these 10 questions for me. Great. Now I can spend those 7 minutes that I would have spent creating questions thinking more about the learning experience I'm going to create for my students. And so, it's kind of like whatever that quote is from Spider-Man from his Uncle Ben, like, with great responsibility comes, or with great power comes great responsibility, right? We could easily use this to be much, much lazier teachers. There is no doubt about that. But we could also use it to be much, much greater teachers at the same time.
Ken, can I just challenge that though?
Yeah.
I think it's disrespectful to call it lazy. Simply put, in a phase right now where we are looking at educators as, a few that are remaining in a field that is fleeting. If I want to be a lazy teacher, what you just said was I took this time that I would have done manually grading and I am no longer manually grading. You did not change your teaching experience one bit. So if you walk away after a self-graded assessment, you got the same amount accomplished. And if I can, and that's where I think, the snap tools, the snap feedback that you get from Quizizz is probably the most impactful amount of data that you actually need. And claim me as lazy, I'm sure that a lot of educators listening right now are saying, I would love to make everything a data-based decision. I don't have the time, or I don't have the mental capability. So call me lazy, call me a slacker, whatever you want to. Show me the teacher that's actually diving into it. If I can create a system with my kids that creates efficiency. I have a friend of mine who's a high school math teacher that flipped his classroom, and is one of those things that he got through his normal curriculum so much faster without the interruptions, that he did really cool things with his kids and then ran out of things to do with his kids because it became so efficient. And there is no capacity, if he did no more, that he did less service to kids because he transitioned. So not to
let me
challenge
clarify,
that.
because you're
Yeah,
right, because I used a strong word. So when I was saying being lazy, I mean, like, if you're just using AI to pretty much like do everything that you do in the classroom, right? You're just taking advantage of it for not every lesson, but most of your lessons, where you're just using it to spit out questions, spit out slides, spit out resources for your kids, and you're just handing it off to them. Okay, so
totally.
that's which teachers are not doing, right? But
Yeah,
I'm just saying you could easily allow it to go to that end. If you're using these tools of efficiency to gain 10 more minutes of spending time with your children or your wife or yourself versus grading, and instead of analyzing data and planning, that's great too, because that's going to make you a better educator, because
totally.
you have that time with your family again. So it's not that you have to use every tool out there to re-leverage your time to make the classroom experience perfect. You have that balance too, right? You're able to get 15 more minutes of sleep, 15 more minutes with family, 15 minutes to actually cook a healthy meal. Like, there's 1,000 things that you could put in that realm. So I think it's about using it to make yourself and your classroom a better experience overall.
Yeah, and I don't want to go down the tangent, but Kyle, I kind of want to even turn it to you in that realm where, like, I don't think anyone's saying technology is ever going to completely eliminate, and you mentioned that earlier, and I think that is a huge thing. We didn't have that with general technology. We're probably not going to have that with AI, even though there's more capability behind it. I think it goes back to that leverage and the permission, because I think that discrepancy of what we're debating is, ooh, can I really trust it? Because it feels like it could be a great resource. I want it to be a perfect resource. I want to depend on it. And I think that's the big concern, as I don't want to say anything is going to be lower quality. Naturally, doing anything without the human touch is going to be lower quality, but I don't want it to be such a point of diminishing returns I'm willing to give up to free myself. But if there's a huge discrepancy, then we're going to have an issue.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be a challenge with AI for a little while, until it all, I don't know, either works itself out, or maybe that's just going to always be how it is. Um, can I pivot a little with the AI and stay on here for a second, if you don't mind, though, and go back to Quizizz, because this is something that about the AI that I think sets Quizizz apart from all these other tools. And I'm curious to get your guys' take on it. So the reason the YouTube video is, like, the idea of creating material, AI creation, as much as you've said, Matt, like, it might not be perfect, it's still very appealing, because what a ridiculous time saver. But we talked about before with the whole teleport, like saving, like making a quiz quickly on Quizizz, or finding a quiz, that was never truly an issue, honestly, in the first place. Like we talked about, it wasn't hard to find a quiz. So what our focus on originally with AI, and still is a main focus, is called, right now it's called Enhance, and the name might change, but it's taking the quizzes you have that maybe you made yourself, right? Or you found them, or you teleported, whatever you did, but you approved the content and like making it better. And so by that I mean this is the whole this is the second big bucket of Quiz AI, which is like at the most simple level, what if you could hit a button and you can differentiate that quiz into 3 different versions for your classroom? You know what I mean? Like by like a really simple way of just simplifying the wording or taking away less option choices or something like that. Like, so you're not creating anything new. You're just taking it like a really common need to differentiate, which is going to be a big focus. Like that's the number one focus right now is how do we help teachers differentiate? Um, and or even like you talked about, Matt, like the fun, the meme, like another tweet I sent out that went kind of like big was like this like idea like you can use Quizizz AI enhance, and it was like I'm a big Ted Lasso fan. I don't know if you guys watch Ted Lasso or not, but it was like you can take all your questions and make them sound like Roy Kent wrote them, and you probably wouldn't do that, of course, for kids given how Roy Kent talks. Um, especially with, again, the filters probably would catch everything. But my point is that like then you have an entire quiz that is now all of a sudden like said like Roy Kent, and of course you could do like Iron Man or SpongeBob or whoever, right? That would make the kids like cringe. I can't believe like you think we actually still like SpongeBob. Like it doesn't matter. Like, but you can in a button make all your questions sound as if they were said by this kind of famous person, which in the grand scheme of things sounds like not life changing. But again, if it can make your kids smile and make them excited to see that next question because they can't wait to see is this going to be really funny or really terrible? I don't know. And so there's other things like that, like change the language or simplify the wording or like there's all these different enhances. So there's also a really big focus we have right now on just taking the stuff that you approved and just making it better, which I think is kind of cool.
Well, and I think that's even the next step of that gives legs to my pedestal talk a moment ago. I apologize, but I think even if what Quizizz was originally was a replacement of a dull way to get information, and now it's engagement, and that's the only thing. The kids are smiling when they're taking a quiz as opposed to dreading the paper and pencil. It still is accountable, whatever the case may be, if that's the only thing they get out of it. And then you start layering the conversations, the pride or the growth, those type features that go beyond just engagement, then that is just purely a win of what we as educators consider baseline. Because we as educators teach as we taught. So, we have, as educators, the 3 of us did not grow up with technology integration. So we are paving the way of how we're using technology for future educators to make those choices. But right now, my default is still paper, pencil. And, there's a ton of value of that. But as we continue to say, at minimum, my kids are smiling when they're going into a quiz, there is less anxiety. And that's the only reason I'm using Quizizz. That's a win in my book at the end of the day. Then you layer all these other features of, this could be a remediation activity, an extension activity, a leveled activity that's at their, reading level based off the enhancements that you're talking about. This just becomes all the bit more, personal and purposeful. But at the end of the day, at minimum, at bare bones, we still had a win by incorporating that as opposed to what our default was.
Yeah, I think the idea of changing the voice or the author of the questions, one, sounds cool and fun, echo everything Matt just said. But I was even just, my head was spinning with ideas instructionally. If you had the features to include either current or maybe even more importantly, like past famous individuals, if we're doing something, if it's a quizzes related to a topic in history, a layer could be who is the person asking these questions, right? If it's related to the content that they're learning in their classroom, like that's kind of where my head went instructionally. And the enhancements, I as far as differentiating, I think it sounds great. Like it's like new ZLA, right? You can change the Lexile levels to make it better fit for your students. It's a button that was already there. It's not degrading your ability as a teacher. It's simplifying it. If you had those AI tools in there to be able to make it easier for EL students to possibly read the language, Again, these are great tools that are there because as teachers, we have to wear so many freaking hats and support so many different students that if we have a tool that is enhancing what we can do, then that's a win for sure. It's like Grammarly, right? My grammar in my writing has improved dramatically over the last 3 years because I've finally, stupidly stopped realizing, hey, I can add Grammarly to my desktop. I can add it to Chrome. I can add it to Outlook. I can add it to everything, right? So I'm constantly using that tool to evaluate my tone in my writing, all of those different layers. So if we can have tools enhance our abilities as teachers, I think that's an absolute win.
I
So
may be in the minority, but when you said News ELA, I always called it Newsella. I don't
yeah,
know why.
that's what everybody calls it.
Oh my goodness, it makes a lot more sense how you just said it, though. All right, moving on.
That nugget's
if I
for
can
free
just,
there for you.
but with the enhance, I think it's really important to point out the main difference, though. Not just forget quizzes for a second, but like we had a whole talk about how the first version of AI, the create, saves teachers time, right? This doesn't save you time. This does not do that. It fills a completely different goal, which is like you can now do things that are more fun that you weren't going to do because like who the heck's got time to change every single question to sound like a famous character? Like, yeah, that's cool, but I'm not going to do that. Like I don't like. So I think that's what excites me. And like again, I know I'm like hypocritical because I was in the classroom, now I left, but like there was a part of me that like I needed a spark. I needed something, I wasn't getting it. And so I don't think this is necessarily going to be it, but I do think that we're in a world right now that like if we can provide that like extra spark in a way, it could be more fun and engaging, and you can like now do really cool things that it doesn't take a lot of time. I think that's going to be really helpful in general for education. So it's not going to save you time, but it's going to allow you to hopefully get that spark and do some fun things with kids.
The two things that it makes me think of is on was it Jimmy Kimmel, where they have the artist come on and they have to sing a song in a different character's voice. Like, what a fascinating idea! But to bring that conversation full circle, Kyle, you were talking about Dave Burgess, Teach Like a Pirate, where kids would pay to come to your lesson, and even if you didn't create a lesson that is the paid for lesson, an adjustment like that gets you halfway there, and you did a few minutes more of work on something, just to make that feel on an off day a little bit closer to the type of stuff you'd be striving for.
Absolutely. So to wrap this up, where can our listeners find more out about Quizizz? What kind of resources are there to, let's say they've never used it or they're still stuck in the, live classroom mode of just the multiple choice questions? So where can they find out more? How can they learn a little bit more about the platform? And then also highlight any differences that come with the free version as well as the paid version where your school can endorse the product fully.
Yeah. So first challenge is make sure that you spell quizzes correctly, because there's a lot of Z's in there, and I still misspell it. So Quizizz, so two Z's at the end. So if you're brand new, honestly, I would say just hop on there and like you'll be guided through it, and you'll find something. And to me, I think it is so intuitive that you'll be able to figure it out. And if you want to just kind of see what's new and exciting, Twitter is a world that I live in a lot, so you can follow us at Quizizz. My name, Kyle Niemis, that's my handle. It's just Kyle Niemis, and I'm posting lots of stuff on there too. And then if you're listening right now and you are let's say a medium Quizizz user, or you're like ready to take the next step, if you maybe we can give them the link in the notes, or they can search for Quizizz Game Changer. That's the course that I run. That like is like a 20-minute like you get your badge, you're a game changer. Like it's like I update it every month, so like you can really, really not fall behind on everything that's happened in quizzes and all the really, really good things. It's like a 20-ish minute crash course. So that's my favorite way if you want to like really dig a little deeper. And then as far as you said, free and the paid features, that sort of thing. So like, yeah, like we definitely have school plans and districts plans and that sort of thing. And so that gives you like access to all the different question types I talked about, because some are free and some are not. And then it also gives you access to like all the different content that's out there, because there's so much out there. And then some of those adjustable settings that are really important are part of that too. But to me, it just gives you all the access to I don't know, everything you'd want and some of those really, really cool features, especially some of those mastery features that I really love.
Awesome. I'll link up to that and I'll make sure that I have the correct links from you. We'll touch base after the show. Any departing information that you want to provide to our listeners about why they should check out Quizizz or why they should circle back to it if they've taken a little bit of a hiatus?
I would just say a lot has changed. And it's always going to be about focusing on kids and making sure they do the best they can and never focus on simply speed and competition. So if that appeals to you, come on back and check it out.
Matt, what are you going to break the Quizizz routine with in your classroom in the next week?
Well, I think I have tendencies. I have the lessons being built through, and we mentioned Canva is a rock star company in general. Like so many educators are flocking their portfolio or their presentations into there. I think the Quizizz lessons really bring hey, I want formative assessment more frequently in my lesson. So if I'm depending on, oh yeah, a really awesome program that naturally does that, the feedback that I actually need to adjust my learning, it's kind of a no-brainer for me to come back to Quizizz and use it. And I also say, it's nice, Kyle, to see Kyle from Quizizz in my email, great person that actually, we get, I don't know, a weekly email or something from you, it feels like. But no, it goes back to a reminder of the core values of an awesome program still are in line with an educator, because too often you go to these conferences and you see a lot of non-educators repping educational products, and we hear educators complain about if only they knew what it was. It does feel like there is representation from teachers. It is adjusted for teachers, and it will continue to be, in the best interest of teachers.
I want to just ask one real quick clarifying question about the lesson one, because that's what really stuck out to me is something new that I was not aware of. And I'm already thinking my next PD session, I want to use it to facilitate. I love layering in those things just for teachers to see. So I have a Google slide presentation, let's say 20 slides. I can decide after slide 4, I want to insert a Quizizz question. Is it one question? Can I do multiple in that moment? Is there kind of any limit to that? And do I move from, let's say I put 2 questions between slide 4 and 5. Does it do both questions right away, or does it do question 1? I can wait till everybody answers, we discuss it, do the next question, and then continue with the slides. It's kind of all work that way.
Yep. Just it'll go one question at a time, and you can put a timer on or stop it, or just see the data. And yeah, I'll send you I have this video. It's like in 2 minutes you can turn your PD session into like this really, really cool thing, and you can embed like really cool websites in there too. So like again, I can get ahead of myself, but yes, we'll start there. Just one question at a time.
That's great, because we've said many times on the show that it's so important that you are actually holding students accountable for, 1, paying attention to what you're saying, and 2, holding yourself accountable to know, do they actually understand it, not understand it, gauging your whole class, not just relying on the one student that raises their hand and answers your question correct. So I'm excited to check that out. And I'll throw that video too in our show notes as well. So Kyle, thank you so much for coming back. I love this conversation. I love the layer of AI and just learning all about Quizizz. And like Matt and I have said before, we've done one more show like this in the past where we really highlight an educational tool. And we are only doing this because both Matt and I believe that Quizizz is a quality tool that can enhance the instructional experience for teachers, the learning experience for students. And, as having you on the show before, Kyle, we knew that you were supporting a product that would do the same, because that aligns with your values as an educator.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for having me on. This is awesome, as always.
Yep, absolutely. Matt, why don't you take us on out of here?
All right, as we power our episode down, Kyle, as you did before, you left us powered up. Thank you for the time, and everyone stay well. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.